And I'm Marie-Helene Budworth. I'm from the School of Human Resource Management. Most of my background is within psychology, so you'll see a lot of psychology threads through what I'm going to talk about. There's a common finding in social psychology. The finding is that modesty leads often women to underrepresent their accomplishments relative to men. Two individuals are sitting in a classroom. The male turns to the female and says, "What did you get on the exam?" The female says, "I did all right." The female then turns to the male and says, "What did you get?" And he says, "I rocked it, best exam I've ever gotten. It was a 75, man, that was great." Meanwhile, the women had an 89 and didn't say anything about it. Right? This is the way that when the gender difference is the way that men are socialized in a way that is different for women. Now, this has been studied within educational settings, but hasn't been looked at extensively within the workplace. What are the implications for career outcomes for women and men? So I did an initial study just to see if there was anything there, where I measured values towards modesty for women and men in a unionized environment. Unionized is important because it's a fairly conservative test. You'd expect salaries to be fairly clustered in this type of environment. But what we found was not that. We found what you'd expect for women. Women who feel it's important to be modest earn less than women who do not feel that's important. So women who value modesty and humbleness have an economic penalty relative to those who are willing to self-promote a little bit more. Where it becomes interesting is when you look at men. It's actually the opposite finding. Men who believe it's important to be modest earn more than men who believe it's not important to be modest. So our theory here is that perhaps the men who believe it's important to be modest are still self-promoting quite effectively because they are socialized to do so, whereas men who believe it's important, who don't believe it's important to be modest, are crossing the line and becoming arrogant. Right. So this first study is an initial study that just scratches at an issue that needs to be uncovered. And in the summer months, I'll be doing additional work that looks more closely at the behaviors that we see in the workplace and the reaction to those behaviors, and trying to connect the dots, the process that leads to these differences in economic outcomes for men versus women.